There is a truth often hidden in plain sight. Scarcity in your external world is a mirror of the fractures within your inner world. Many strive endlessly to accumulate wealth, yet remain trapped in cycles of lack and struggle. The reason is not found in the economy, in your job, or even in bad luck. It lies within the unseen patterns of the soul. A broken soul, wounded by unhealed experiences and unconscious beliefs, becomes the very prison that blocks abundance. To free yourself, you must first understand the invisible origin of scarcity. There is a great danger in believing that the past lies behind us simply because time has carried us forward. What we do not confront does not disappear. It lingers in the unseen chambers of the psyche, shaping our choices, our relationships, and even the material conditions of our lives. The wounds we refuse to acknowledge become invisible chains, fastening us to cycles of scarcity and struggle. We tell ourselves that we are unlucky, that the world is unjust, that opportunity never comes our way. Yet beneath these explanations lies a deeper truth. The inner fractures of the soul dictate the outer realities of our existence. When a child grows up under the weight of rejection, neglect, or betrayal, the scar does not heal with age. It settles into the unconscious as a quiet but persistent voice. You are not worthy. You do not deserve more. You must remain small. These are not conscious thoughts we deliberately repeat, but rather unspoken beliefs that govern our actions. And so, when wealth presents itself, we turn away without realizing why. When abundance knocks, we close the door, convinced it must be for someone else. Imagine the child who has always heard, "We cannot afford that," or "Money doesn't grow on trees." These phrases, repeated with conviction by struggling parents, become more than practical truths. They harden into psychological laws. The child grows into adulthood carrying these laws as though they were carved into stone. Even when the adult earns enough to rise above scarcity, there is a compulsion to recreate the familiar conditions of lack. They overspend, they undercharge for their labor, they sell, sabotage with procrastination, or they remain in jobs that suffocate them because unconsciously they believe security is safer than expansion. What is truly at play is not the economy nor fate, but the hidden script of the broken soul. It is a tragic irony that the very wounds we bury to avoid pain are the ones that bind us most tightly. Like shadows trailing behind us, they dictate our every movement while remaining unseen. The man who avoids pursuing a promotion because he fears rejection is not lazy. He is shackled by the old wound of being told he was never good enough. The woman who avoids starting her business despite her brilliance is not lacking ambition. She is imprisoned by the shame of a past failure that she has not allowed herself to grieve. Each of these wounds becomes a chain, and the more we resist facing them, the tighter they bind us. But the soul longs for freedom. There comes a moment when life itself conspires to reveal what has been hidden. This often arrives in the form of recurring patterns, the same financial struggles, the same disappointing relationships, the same cycle of hope and collapse. Many despair at this repetition, but repetition is not punishment, it is revelation. Life repeats what we have not yet understood. The wound demands to be seen, not as an enemy, but as a teacher. Healing begins the moment we dare to look directly at the pain we have buried. This is not a simple act. To face a childhood scar of rejection is to reopen a place we have spent years trying to protect. To admit to feelings of unworthiness is to strip away the masks we have worn to convince the world and ourselves that we are strong. Yet true strength is born not in denial but in acceptance. When you bring into the light what has been hidden in shadow, it begins to lose its power. The belief, "I do not deserve prosperity," weakens when it is spoken aloud, examined and challenged. It is no longer an unexamined truth, but a wound in need of care. There are countless examples of individuals who have transformed scarcity into abundance by confronting the hidden chains of their past. Consider the man who spent his early life in poverty, convinced that wealth was forever out of reach. For years he repeated the pattern of scraping by, even when his talents could have lifted him higher. It was only when he entered therapy and confronted the rage and sorrow of his childhood that he discovered the deeper truth. He had equated wealth with betrayal because in his family those who pursued money were judged as selfish. This unconscious belief had sabotaged him for decades. Once brought into awareness, he was able to redefine wealth not as betrayal but as expansion. And within a few years, his financial reality transformed. Or consider the woman who grew up hearing her father say, "People like us never make it far." She absorbed this as prophecy. Each time she came close to success, she withdrew, convinced something terrible would happen if she went further than her family had. The wound was not financial but ancestral, a loyalty to struggle that lived in her bones. When she faced this wound, grieving the limitations her parents carried, she realized that honoring them did not require repeating their fate. In embracing this truth, she stepped into abundance, building a life they could never have imagined. These stories are not rare. They are the silent biographies of countless souls. What they reveal is that healing is not only emotional but practical. To face your wounds is to unlock energy that has long been imprisoned. When you no longer carry the weight of unworthiness, you make decisions from confidence rather than fear. When you are no longer shackled by shame, you allow yourself to be visible, to charge your worth, to pursue what once felt impossible. Wealth becomes not a far-off dream, but a natural extension of your wholeness. The path to healing does not demand perfection. It demands honesty. It asks you to sit with your own story without judgment, to acknowledge where you have been wounded, and to recognize the ways those wounds have shaped your life. It asks you to extend compassion to the self that has been suffering in silence. For it is not through condemnation, but through compassion that chains are broken. The truth is this: the soul was never meant to remain broken. Fractures exist to invite integration. Pain arises not to destroy you, but to awaken you, and in the very place you fear to look, in the very wound you have long avoided, lies the doorway to freedom. Wealth begins not with numbers in a bank account, but with the healing of the soul. To step into abundance is to declare with your whole being that you are worthy, not because you have achieved or proven, but because you are alive, and life itself seeks to flow through you in fullness. Scarcity presents itself to us as something purely external, as though it were an objective condition dictated by circumstance. We look at the empty wallet, the mounting bills, the job applications unanswered, and we declare that the problem lies out there in the world. Yet this is only the surface appearance. The deeper truth is far more unsettling and far more liberating. Scarcity originates not in the external, but in the inner landscape of the psyche. What we perceive, how we interpret events, what possibilities we allow ourselves to see, these are governed by the state of the soul. A broken soul lives under the dominion of lack. It does not matter how many opportunities pass before it, for the eyes remain blind and the hands remain closed. You can witness this in the ordinary details of daily life. Two people may stand before the same set of circumstances. One sees only obstacles, dangers, and limitations. The other perceives openings, possibilities, and hidden pathways. The conditions are identical, yet the outcomes diverge because the inner perception has shifted. The broken soul, burdened by old wounds, interprets the world through the lens of insufficiency. It says, "I cannot," long before testing whether it might. It says, "Others are chosen, but not me," without realizing that such words are not truth but belief, and beliefs, once planted, bend reality to their will. There is a profound blindness that comes with scarcity of the spirit. You may walk past a door that would change your life and never notice it. You may sit across from someone who could alter the course of your destiny and feel too unworthy to speak. You may receive an idea in the night that could birth abundance, but dismiss it as foolishness because the voice of lack whispers louder than the voice of possibility. In this way, scarcity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more we perceive the world as barren, the more barren it becomes. The more we insist that opportunities do not exist, the less we are able to recognize them even when they are placed directly in our path. Modern research echoes this ancient truth. Behavioral economists have demonstrated how the scarcity mindset narrows attention. When the mind is preoccupied with survival, whether with money, time, or even emotional security, it loses the capacity for wide vision. Creativity diminishes, long-term planning evaporates, and the psyche becomes trapped in what scholars call tunnel vision. It is as though the soul, wounded and broken, sees only the immediate threat of lack and cannot raise its eyes to the horizon of abundance. Yet the irony is that this very narrowness perpetuates scarcity. The individual misses chances, fails to plan, overlooks resources, and thereby reinforces the cycle of deprivation. Consider the story of a man who had lived most of his life in financial struggle. Each day was consumed by the thought of how to stretch his wages until the next paycheck. When an opportunity arose to invest in a small business, he declined, convinced that he could not afford the risk. Years later, he discovered that those who joined prospered greatly. His decision was not irrational in the sense of mathematics. It was shaped by the tunnel vision of scarcity. He could not imagine future gain because his psyche was locked in the immediacy of survival. His broken soul, scarred by years of lack, had rendered him incapable of envisioning abundance even when it stood before him. The opposite is equally true. There are those who, though surrounded by material lack, refuse to submit to the narrative of scarcity. They perceive possibility where others see only despair. History offers countless examples: immigrants arriving in new lands with nothing but determination, inventors working in poverty yet birthing ideas that transformed civilization, individuals who rose from destitution to prosperity not because the external conditions were favorable, but because their inner vision was not shackled by lack. Their souls, though battered, were not broken. They carried within them an image of abundance, and this image guided their actions until reality conformed. The task before each of us, then, is not first to amass wealth, but to heal the lens through which we perceive. True wealth begins in the imagination, in the quiet conviction that opportunities surround us and that we are capable of grasping them. This is not naive optimism. It is a shift of perspective that opens the mind to resources previously unseen. For example, a person locked in scarcity may believe they lack connections, when in reality they have acquaintances, friends, or colleagues who would be willing to help if only they asked. Scarcity whispers, "You are alone," but abundance replies, "You are supported." It is the inner voice we choose to believe that determines which reality becomes visible. When the soul is broken, it resists this truth. It clings to the familiar story of lack, because that story, though painful, is known. To step into abundance requires courage. It requires the willingness to risk disappointment, to imagine more than survival, to claim worthiness even when the old voices declare unworthiness. This is why healing is inseparable from prosperity. Until the inner fracture is mended, the psyche will continue to reproduce external scarcity, no matter how much effort one exerts. The journey out of psychological scarcity begins with awareness. It begins when you notice the small ways in which the belief in lack controls you, when you hear yourself say, "I can't afford to dream," or "people like me don't succeed." Each of these phrases is not a statement of fact, but a confession of perception. They reveal the brokenness of the soul, not the state of the world. By naming them, by questioning them, by replacing them with the possibility that something greater might be true, you begin to widen the tunnel of vision. You begin to see beyond survival toward expansion. There is a profound liberation in realizing that wealth is not waiting to descend upon you from outside, but to be unlocked from within. When you change your lens, the same world appears different. The unpaid bill is no longer a sentence of despair, but a challenge that awakens resourcefulness. The job rejection is no longer a proof of unworthiness, but a redirection toward a more fitting opportunity. The temporary lack of funds is no longer an identity, but a passing condition. This is the alchemy of perception. Scarcity turns to abundance when the soul begins to believe itself capable of more. To live in this way is not to deny reality, but to reshape it. Abundance does not fall from the sky. It emerges from the alignment of inner vision with outer action. But no action is possible until the inner vision is healed. A broken soul sees lack and creates lack. A healed soul sees possibility and creates abundance. The world responds not merely to what we do, but to what we believe ourselves to be. If we walk as though we are worthy, opportunities reveal themselves. If we live as though prosperity is possible, the steps toward it appear. The external world bends itself, often mysteriously, to the conviction carried within. Scarcity, then, is not material but psychological. It is not the absence of resources but the blindness to them. It is not the cruelty of fate but the reflection of a wounded soul. And until that wound is healed, no amount of external striving will suffice. The first wealth you must seek is the wealth of perception, the restoration of vision, the belief that you are not condemned to lack. From that place, the material abundance will follow, not as an illusion, not as a trick of the mind, but as the natural unfolding of a soul no longer bound by chains of scarcity. Shame is perhaps the most corrosive poison the human soul can carry, for it is not merely about what we have done, but about what we believe ourselves to be. Guilt says, "I made a mistake." Shame whispers more insidiously, "I am the mistake." When such a belief takes root deep within the psyche, it becomes a hidden law by which we live, an invisible ceiling that no effort, no talent, no ambition seems able to break. It is this hidden shame that quietly repels prosperity, not because the world is unwilling to give, but because the soul, in its brokenness, cannot accept. When a person feels they are fundamentally flawed, every opportunity for expansion becomes a threat rather than a gift. To step forward would expose them, they believe, to the world's scrutiny. To charge their true worth would reveal them as an impostor. To succeed too greatly would invite judgment they fear they cannot endure. And so they hold back, shrinking from the fullness of life, retreating into safety, even when that safety is woven from scarcity and struggle. This is why so many brilliant ideas remain unborn, why so many skilled workers remain underpaid, why so many dreams rot quietly in the soil of self-doubt. The broken soul shackled by shame does not fail because it lacks ability, but because it has been convinced it is unworthy of abundance. Consider the entrepreneur with vision burning in her mind, ideas that could change lives, services that could bring healing or joy to others. Yet she hesitates month after month, never launching, never offering her gift to the world. She calls it procrastination, perfectionism, or bad timing. But beneath these excuses lies the quiet voice of shame. Who are you to do this? You will be exposed. You are not enough. And so the ideas die within her, not because the world rejected them, but because shame silenced them before they ever saw the light of day. Or think of the professional, skilled and competent, yet always underselling himself, always charging less than his peers, always negotiating against his own interests. He tells himself he is being kind, fair, or practical, but in truth he is obeying the hidden law of shame. You are not worth more. To ask for more is arrogance. To demand your value is to reveal your fraudulence. And so he accepts less than he deserves, and his financial life reflects not his talent, but his inner fracture. Shame is not always loud. Sometimes it moves silently, like a shadow that falls across every endeavor. It appears in the woman who avoids networking because she fears others will see through her. It hides in the man who declines promotions because he feels unprepared, no matter how long he has worked. It lingers in the parent who discourages their own children's dreams, projecting their hidden belief that success belongs only to others. The tragedy is that shame, left unhealed, not only blocks prosperity in the present, but transmits itself across generations, teaching children to inherit the same invisible chains. The origin of shame is often found in moments so early and so deep that they escape memory. A harsh word from a parent, a teacher's careless criticism, the ridicule of peers, the silence of neglect, all these concede the belief that one is defective. Over time, life adds more evidence, for the psyche, once wounded, looks only for confirmation of its brokenness. Failures become proof of worthlessness, while successes are dismissed as luck or deception. Thus, shame becomes self-free, enforcing a cycle so complete that it feels inescapable, but it is not inescapable. For shame, unlike truth, cannot endure the light of awareness. To begin healing, one must first recognize that shame is not fact but story. It is a narrative inherited from the wounds of others, a projection of their limitations onto your soul. A child told they are unworthy grows into an adult who believes it, but the belief does not make it real. It is a false story carried like a curse, and curses can be broken when they are named. This act of naming is terrifying, for it demands honesty. To stand and say, "I have lived my life believing I am not enough," is to expose the rawness of the wound, but in exposure lies liberation. What is brought into the light loses its power to dominate in the dark. When you see shame as a voice that is not yours, as a story that was never your truth, you create space for a new identity to emerge. The journey does not end there. To dismantle shame requires deliberate practice, the daily affirmation of inherent worth. It is not about proving yourself through achievements or possessions, for these only mask the wound without healing it. True healing comes when you can say, without qualification, "I am worthy because I exist. I deserve prosperity not as reward, but as birthright." Such statements may feel foreign, even arrogant, to the one long bound by shame. Yet repeated, affirmed, lived into, they become the foundation of a new self. And from this new self, prosperity flows naturally, for the barriers have been removed. Look to those who embody abundance with grace, and you will see not arrogance but acceptance. They stand unapologetically in their value. They do not shrink from asking their price, from sharing their gifts, from stepping into the fullness of their vision. They understand that prosperity is not about taking from others, but about allowing the energy of life to flow through them without obstruction. They have confronted their shame, stripped it of its lies, and in doing so have opened themselves to wealth in every sense, financial, emotional, spiritual. Wealth, after all, is not merely money. It is the ability to claim your rightful space in the world, to stand tall without apology, to express your gifts without fear of exposure. Shame contracts the soul, makes it small, hides it away. Healing shame expands the soul, makes it luminous, and that light draws abundance as surely as the sun draws life from the earth. Every time you silence yourself out of fear of being seen, shame wins and prosperity retreats. Every time you discount your worth, shame wins and wealth slips further away. But every time you dare to stand in your truth, to claim your value, to reject the old story of defectiveness, you weaken shame's grip. And one day, if you persist, it will break entirely, leaving you free to walk in abundance without fear. The truth is that wealth flows most freely to those who no longer negotiate with their worthiness. When you strip away the false stories you inherited and stand unapologetically in your value, you align yourself with life's natural abundance. The universe does not withhold from you, it reflects you. If you see yourself as broken, life mirrors scarcity. If you see yourself as whole, life mirrors prosperity. The choice, though difficult, is always yours. Shame is heavy, but it is not eternal. You can lay it down, and when you do, you will find that the prosperity you sought was never absent. It was waiting for the moment you believed yourself ready to receive it. A life divided against itself cannot stand in abundance. When the soul is fractured, when its parts remain estranged from one another, energy disperses in conflicting directions. One part of you longs for expansion, yet another clings to safety. One part reaches for prosperity, while another whispers that wealth will corrupt or isolate you. This inner fragmentation creates a perpetual struggle, a tug-of war within the psyche, and the result is paralysis, self-sabotage, and exhaustion. You may set goals with great passion, but some hidden current pulls you back into familiar patterns. You may take steps forward only to unravel them with equal force. The broken soul is not without desire. It is without unity. Abundance, contrary to popular belief, is not simply the accumulation of money, possessions, or achievements. It is the capacity to direct your full being toward a chosen vision without contradiction. It is the freedom that comes when desire, thought, and action move as one current rather than as scattered fragments. Without this integration, no amount of external gain can be sustained. This is why many who rise quickly to wealth or success lose it as suddenly as they obtained it. The outer fortune collapses because the inner house remains divided. Imagine a man who builds a thriving business through relentless ambition, yet inside he carries unresolved shame, guilt, or resentment. His outer achievements mask an inner war. He may sabotage his success through reckless spending, destructive relationships, or addictions meant to quiet the noise of inner conflict. Or consider the woman who climbs to financial security, but secretly believes that wealth makes her selfish or unlovable. She unconsciously distances herself from her own prosperity, giving it away, downplaying her achievements, or avoiding opportunities for growth. In both cases, the fragmentation of the soul prevents them from holding what they have gained. The vessel is cracked, the water of abundance leaks out. Integration is the art of mending this vessel. It is not about erasing the parts of you that are wounded or fearful, but about bringing them into harmony with your greater vision. It requires acknowledging the shadow as well as the light. The shadow holds the fears, the doubts, the memories we prefer to bury. Yet these hidden parts, when ignored, sabotage us from behind. When brought into the light, however, they reveal themselves not as enemies but as protectors that have outlived their role. The fear of failure, for instance, is often the shadow side of a deep longing for safety. The self-doubt that silences your voice may once have been a shield to protect you from ridicule. When you recognize this, you can honor the wisdom in these defenses while no longer allowing them to dictate your life. Integration is the union of opposites, the reconciliation of ambition with humility, of desire with discipline, of pain with purpose. This is not a quick or easy process. It requires honesty, patience, and the courage to sit with discomfort. But it is the only way to transform fragmentation into strength. The energy once lost to inner conflict becomes available for creation, for vision, for the building of a life aligned with abundance. We see evidence of this truth in the lives of those who have sustained prosperity, not merely for a season, but for a lifetime. They are rarely the ones without wounds or shadows. Rather, they are those who have learned to integrate them. Nelson Mandela, for example, endured decades of imprisonment, an experience that could have shattered him into bitterness and rage. Instead, he emerged integrated, holding both his pain and his vision, both his anger and his compassion. Because he was whole, he could lead with strength and sustain the immense weight of power entrusted to him. Though his story is not one of financial wealth, it illustrates the same principle. Abundance of influence, of respect, of legacy requires inner unity. Contrast this with countless examples of public figures who achieve rapid success, but collapse under the weight of their own fragmentation. Wealth, fame, and recognition pour into their lives, but the unhealed parts of their psyche, addiction, insecurity, unresolved trauma, erupt in destructive ways. Their downfall is not due to lack of opportunity, but to lack of integration. The inner fractures consume them, and the abundance they once held slips through their fingers. To live in abundance requires more than the pursuit of external goals. It requires the courage to turn inward and reconcile the many selves within you. You must meet the fearful child who clings to safety and assure them they are no longer alone. You must face the ambitious dreamer and temper their fire with wisdom. You must embrace the wounded parts of yourself and allow them to become sources of compassion rather than prisons of pain. Only when these voices within you are brought into dialogue, acknowledged and honored, can you step forward with the full strength of your being. This inner work may seem intangible compared to the concrete pursuit of wealth, but its impact is deeply practical. When you are integrated, your decisions become clear, consistent, and aligned. You no longer undermine yourself with hesitation or self-sabotage. You move steadily, channeling all your energy in one direction. Opportunities once overlooked become visible. Relationships once strained by hidden resentments begin to heal. Money, once a source of anxiety, becomes a tool for creation rather than a battlefield of fear. The path of integration is not about perfection, but about wholeness. To be whole does not mean to be without shadow, but to no longer be ruled by it. To be whole is to stand in your fullness, acknowledging both your wounds and your wisdom, your fears and your strengths, your failures and your triumphs. It is from this wholeness that true abundance flows, for abundance is not simply what you have, but what you are able to hold without losing yourself. A fragmented soul may achieve temporary success, but it will always feel precarious, always threatened by collapse. A whole soul, integrated and united, can sustain abundance because it no longer fights itself. It becomes a vessel strong enough to carry wealth, love, influence, or purpose without breaking. Integration is the foundation, and without it, all outer gain is built on sand. The invitation, then, is to turn inward, to gather the scattered pieces of yourself, to listen to the voices you have long silenced, and to reconcile the opposites within. Do this, and you will find that abundance is not something to be chased outside of you, but something that naturally emerges from the harmony within. The world reflects the state of the soul. When the soul is broken, life mirrors fragmentation. When the soul is whole, life mirrors abundance, and in that wholeness lies the power to sustain prosperity that no storm can take away. Wealth in its truest form has never been the mere possession of currency, nor the piling up of gold or property. These are but outer symbols, shadows cast by something far deeper, far more intimate to the soul. To believe that money alone constitutes wealth is to confuse the image with the reality. Wealth is, first and foremost, a state of harmony within. It is the resonance that occurs when the soul is no longer at war with itself, when inner contradictions are resolved, and when one's actions flow from a center that is whole. In such a state, prosperity is not something chased with desperation. It becomes something drawn naturally into one's orbit, for the world outside responds faithfully to the world within. The fragmented soul lives in scarcity not because opportunities are absent, but because it cannot recognize or sustain them. Imagine a person who has brilliant ideas, but who harbors a deep sense of unworthiness. No matter how many chances arise, this inner fracture will distort their perception. They will see rejection where none exists, sabotage their progress, or attract relationships that reinforce their doubt. On the other hand, the one who is inwardly harmonious moves with a quiet confidence, a clarity that others feel. People are drawn to such a presence not out of pity but out of recognition. They sense order, balance, and authenticity. In this way, wealth emerges as a reflection not of toil alone, but of inner alignment. Consider the stories of those who have risen from the depths of poverty into lasting abundance. It was not strategy alone that carried them forward, though discipline and effort surely played their part. The decisive factor was the transformation of the inner world. Oprah Winfrey's life speaks powerfully to this truth. As a child, she endured abuse, poverty, and rejection, circumstances that could have shattered her into despair. Yet she chose to integrate her wounds into wisdom, to shape her suffering into strength. She did not deny her brokenness, but made of it a foundation for compassion, vision, and resilience. It was this inner wholeness that became the wellspring of her prosperity. Money did not give her value. Her alignment with her own worth drew wealth into her life. This pattern is echoed again and again. Where harmony reigns within, abundance finds fertile soil. Where the soul is divided, abundance withers like seed cast on rock. Even if riches come for a time, they do not stay, for the vessel is unprepared to hold them. History is littered with examples of individuals who gained sudden wealth through inheritance, lottery, or fleeting success, only to lose it all. The fortune disappeared not because fate was cruel, but because the inner house was not in order. Without harmony, wealth becomes chaos, and chaos always collapses upon itself. Inner harmony is not a luxury, it is the prerequisite for sustainable prosperity. It is not achieved by silencing or repressing parts of yourself, but by bringing them into balance. The fearful child within you, the ambitious dreamer, the critic who doubts, the lover who longs, all of these voices have a place in the symphony of the soul. Wealth flows when this inner orchestra plays in tune. Without harmony, the notes clash, and life becomes noise rather than music. With harmony, your actions carry a resonance that others cannot ignore. Employers, clients, partners, and strangers sense the balance within you, and they respond with trust, with opportunities, with resources. One might ask, How does this inner harmony translate into the tangible form of wealth? The answer is simple, though not easy. When you are whole, you no longer leak energy in hidden battles. You no longer waste time doubting, retracting, or sabotaging yourself. Your clarity allows you to see opportunities others miss, to make decisions without hesitation, to persist without being consumed by fear. This efficiency of spirit compounds in the outer world as effectiveness, influence, and eventually material gain. Wealth is not created by effort alone, but by the purity of effort directed without contradiction. Take the example of two people given the same chance at success. One is riddled with self, doubt and inner conflict. The other is aligned, whole and clear. The first hesitates, overthinks, fears judgment, and spends as much time battling themselves as they do working toward the goal. The second acts decisively, attracts support naturally, and continues with steadiness even through obstacles. After some years, the difference between their lives is stark. The same opportunity was given, but only the one with inner harmony was able to nurture it into wealth. It is tempting to believe that the path to abundance lies solely in external labor, longer hours, more strategies, ceaseless hustle. But many who work themselves to exhaustion remain poor in both wallet and spirit. The missing ingredient is not effort but alignment. Wealth is not something you wrestle from the world, but something that mirrors your inner state. When you believe in your worth, opportunities multiply. When you carry inner clarity, others trust your vision. When you radiate peace, people want to be near you, to collaborate, to invest. This is why wealth expands most for those who do not chase it with desperation, but who embody the qualities it mirrors. The truth is that abundance responds to worthiness, not in the shallow sense of entitlement, but in the profound sense of self-recognition. To recognize yourself as worthy is to declare that you are not merely the sum of your wounds or failures, but the bearer of infinite potential. This recognition does not inflate the ego. Rather, it humbles and strengthens, for it accepts both shadow and light as part of the same whole. From such wholeness flows a confidence that cannot be feigned, a courage that persists through difficulty, and a wisdom that knows how to use wealth not as an idol, but as a tool. Wealth is not meant to enslave you, nor to become the measure of your soul. It is meant to serve as an expression of your inner order, a means to create, to uplift, to share. When inner harmony is present, wealth does not corrupt, it amplifies. It becomes an extension of the wholeness within, magnifying generosity, vision, and love. Without harmony, wealth amplifies chaos, greed, and fear. The difference is not in the money, but in the state of the soul that wields it. Therefore, the question is not merely how to make more money, but how to become whole. For when you are whole, the rest follows. The fractured soul sees only scarcity, no matter how much it holds. The harmonious soul sees abundance, even in times of lack, and this perception itself draws prosperity closer. The world is, in the end, a mirror. What you carry within, it reflects without. If you cultivate inner harmony, the reflection you encounter will be one of wealth, steady, lasting, and deeply fulfilling. Your broken soul does not have to be the end of your story. It is the beginning of awakening. Scarcity is only the outer echo of an inner fracture, and abundance is the song of a soul restored to wholeness. Heal yourself, and wealth will follow, not as the goal, but as the natural expression of a life aligned with its deepest truth.